Hey crafters! Today I'm going to show you how my family created a raised garden bed. We didn't get it finished and planted until about last week, so we were definitely a little late getting planted this year, but it worked out okay because we had a freeze come through in the middle of the month and we didn't get planted until after the freeze. I'm going to show you how we assembled our garden bed, and then I'll share some tips at the end of this video on things we would change next time around. So materials. We built our raised garden box out of metal siding and wood. The metal siding was left over from the workshop barn, so all we needed to purchase was the wood. We bought two 12-foot long 2x4s, an 8-foot 2x4, two 12-foot 1x4s, and an 8-foot 1x4. Since we will be growing food in our box, we picked untreated wood so that way chemicals won't reach into our plants. Something that is rot resistant like cedar would be best, but we used pine. Later in this process, I'll show you how we use a natural method to treat our wood and minimize rot. You will also need screws to hold everything together, a screwdriver and some drill bits, and raw linseed oil to help the wood last longer. Here's a quick glance at what we used, but I'll explain more about each of these when we get to it in the project. Now let's look at how we assembled this. Our first step was to prepare the wood. We used 2x4s to make a rectangle and 1x4s to lay flat on top. What we're making in this step is essentially a cap that will go over the metal frame. To start, we cut the 8-foot 2x4 into two roughly 43-inch pieces, one for each short end, and then we got a 12-foot 2x4 for each of the long sides. Then we cut 1x4s to matching length to sit on top of the 2x4s with some overhang. We notched the corners at a 45-degree angle, but our wood was really warped, so it left some gaps. Honestly, it would be easier to just skip the notching step and just let the ends of the long boards butt up against the side of the short boards. Whatever dimensions you make your raised garden bed, just make sure that the 1x4s have some overhang on the inside or the outside of the 2x4 rectangle, because that overhang is going to cover the edge of the siding. So here's how we assembled the wood. The 2x4s form a rectangle frame and the 1x4s create a top piece, which in this clip are underneath our 2x4s because our frame is upside down. Once your wood is cut to size, it's time to screw the pieces together. To attach the 2x4s, we first drilled through our wood with a drill bit to minimize splitting. And then we sent 3-inch decking screws through the side of the long board and the end of the short board. We used 2 screws in each of our corners and attached all 4 corners of the 2x4s together. After the 2x4s were attached, we moved our 1x4 pieces on top of the 2x4 frame. Again, our 45-degree cuts don't fit together well because our 1x4s were warpy. To attach, we once again free-drilled holes through the 1x4 and into the 2x4 frame, and then used 2-inch screws to hold it together. We attached the 1x4s in the corners first to make sure that it was going to fit together well, and then we just went along the sides and added more screws along the sides to hold it together. Again, because our boards were warpy, we had to make sure that we had enough overhang that it would cover the edge of our siding. So once our frame was assembled, we coated it with raw linseed oil to prevent rotting and to extend the life of this garden bed. Now, very important, you need to use raw linseed oil. Boiled linseed oil goes through a different process and has additional chemicals that will seep into the garden bed and into the food you are growing. We had a really difficult time finding raw linseed oil since most stores seem to stock just the boiled linseed oil, so after hunting for weeks, we finally ordered some off of Amazon. I've put a link for the raw linseed oil that we used in the description down below in case you can't find raw linseed oil locally. To seal the wood, follow the directions on your package of linseed oil. We used a brush to coat the wood and we did 2 coats. Make sure you also follow proper disposal procedures when you are done. After the linseed oil dried, it was time to attach our siding. We cut the siding into sections that were 2 feet tall. I didn't film much of this part because the sound of cutting through metal is not exactly pleasant. We also had corner pieces of siding that we cut to 2 feet tall as well. We used a drill driver and these 1-inch screws to bolt the corner pieces in place, and then we attached our siding. Since we're attaching the siding to the inside of the 2x4 frame, and since we wanted the red color on the outside, the metal only touches the 2x4 frame where the siding is notched in. So we did 2 screws along each of these notches and went through 2 sheets of metal where the siding overlapped. Your siding might have different ridges than ours, so just make sure that you have enough overhang from your 1x4s and make sure your attachments are secure so that your garden box will be sturdy. Also, this really should go without saying, but please make sure to put safety first when attaching the siding. The edges are very sharp. Once the siding was attached, all we had left was to put it in place and fill it with dirt. We started filling it with dirt in one spot and then changed our minds on where we wanted to place it, so that meant we had to move the dirt twice. I definitely do not recommend filling it, moving it, and then refilling it, so make sure you like the spot it is in before you start filling it with the dirt. To fill our bed, we first added some sticks and branches to create a hugelkultur-like layer. I think I'm saying that right. I'll put a link below about hugelkultur if you want to look into that. Then we filled the bulk of the bed with mulch from trees we had removed. And lastly, we finished it off with a few bags of cow manure and soil. And now your raised garden bed is ready for planting. In ours, we did a variety of plants, including tomatoes, different herbs, peppers, and some flowers. I'm looking forward to some fresh veggies this summer. Alright, as I mentioned in the beginning, we learned some things along the way that would have made assembly easier and better. So here are 5 tips to improve on our design. Number 1, don't try the 45-degree notch corners. The warp of our boards left significant gapping, and the extra step to cut that angle was kind of unnecessary. Just let the ends butt up against each other. Number 2, leave more overhang. Since our boards were warped, the siding stuck out from underneath the overhang in some spots, so it was a little bit tricky to get that trimmed down so that way we weren't at risk of cutting ourselves on the siding. So make sure when you're assembling and coming up with your dimensions that you leave plenty of overhang when attaching the 1x4s. Number 3, optionally, you could attach the siding to the outside of the 2x4s. So we put our siding on the inside because that way the dirt wouldn't be right up against the wood, and if the dirt were right up against the wood, obviously the wood's gonna rot faster. But the way we have it attached now leaves gaps on the outside where wasps and other insects will likely try to build homes. We may go back and fill these gaps in so we aren't dealing with wasp nests all summer long. Number 4, seal your wood with linseed oil before assembly. This isn't a huge deal, but it might be a little easier to coat your wood before you assemble it, and it would ensure every surface of the wood gets coated. Number 5, create a groove in the ground for the edges of the metal to fit in. We didn't do this step, and ours seems to be holding up well, but if you were to first cut into the ground to create kind of a ditch, if you will, that your metal frame can sit in, it would add a little bit more support to the box and prevent the sides from bowing out at the bottom. So there you have it. This is how you can DIY a raised garden bed. I'm super excited with how it's turned out. I think it looks super cute, and I am ready for some fresh veggies all summer long. You're probably sick of people on YouTube saying this, but if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to support my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting!